Welcome everyone to going through House of the Dragon, also known as Hot D or Hot Damn. My name is Triple S, and in this video I'll be talking about the first episode of the first season, The Heirs of the Dragon. I'll be going through what I like and dislike about the episode, what I feel it does better or worse compared to the source material, and I'll also bring up anything I find interesting or noteworthy enough to mention. There might be spoilers for other media related to the A Song of Ice and Fire series as well, so you've been warned. With all that said, let's begin. Right off the bat, we get a really nice wide shot of the interior of Harrenhal. In Game of Thrones, all we ever really saw were wide shots of the exterior, and scenes of the interior were very claustrophobic, not really showing as much of the vastness of this immense castle. The two sons of King Jaehaerys I, also known as the Conciliator, the Wise, or the Old King, and his wife Alysanne, also known as Good Queen Alysanne, mentioned here as having died tragically, were Aemon and Balon. The third and fourth child of Jaehaerys and Alysanne respectively, after their firstborn son Aegon, who was born early and died 3 years later, and Daenerys. No, not that one. The one who was the firstborn daughter and secondborn child of Jaehaerys and Alysanne. Aemon, Jaehaerys' heir and Rhaenys' father, died in 92 AC when an arrow meant for someone standing next to him hit him in the throat. Jaehaerys then named Balon, also known as the Spring Prince, and who was Viserys' father, as his new heir. However, he also died in 101 AC of a burst belly, again leaving Jaehaerys without a named heir. Jaehaerys had one last living son, Vaegon, also known as Vaegon the Dragonless, who was an archmaester at the citadel of Oldtown. Some accounts say that Jaehaerys offered to make Vaegon his heir, but he refused, and others say the father only sought the counsel of the son, and that it was in fact Vaegon who suggested this idea of a greater council to determine who should be named Jaehaerys' new heir. No mention is made of Corlys and Rhaenys' son Laenor, who was actually the person Corlys and Rhaenys were trying to be named Jaehaerys' heir, not Rhaenys herself as the show states. Oh, so you mentioned Dany, but you don't mention the one true king of Westeros, the king who knew nothing, the king who didn't want it, Aegon Jon Snow Targaryen. What the seven hells show you, sexist? So, House of the Dragon takes place 172 years before Dany is born. So if we go with her TV show birth date at 281 AC, then the show takes place around 109 AC. But if we instead go with her book series date at 284 AC, then the show takes place around 112 AC, which is the more likely of the two. This is all ignoring the fact that according to Fire and Blood, the events that this show is adapting actually take place around 105 AC. So it would appear that the show takes place around 7 years later compared to the book, and as such, most of the characters have been aged up either accordingly or instead significantly. Alicent's Hightower, however, doesn't seem to have been aged up at all, so that she can instead match more in age with Rhaenyra, who is around 16 in the show rather than 9 like she is in the book. As such, they are more friends in the show compared to in the book, where an 18-year-old Alicent is sort of an older sister figure to 9-year-old Rhaenyra. And here we get our first look at an intact dragon pit, essentially a giant stable for dragons. We see this location in seasons 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones, but it's in a destroyed state. Maybe in House of the Dragon, we'll get to see its destruction. I know it's a small, insignificant detail, but I love that they've actually given the dragons saddles for their riders to sit and strap themselves into, like they're described as having in the books, so that they don't fall off. It's always annoyed me that Dany never had any saddles made for her dragons, and that people just somehow easily stayed on, despite the dragon twisting and turning through the air at high speed. Ooh, are these the incredibly dangerous serpentine steps that have injured so many people and claimed so many lives that they really should be condemned and never used? I wonder how many people are gonna throw a hissy fit calling the show woke and claiming it's going against and mocking traditional family values in regards to the woman's role of bearing children, all because Rhaenyra says this one sarcastic line about how she'd rather fight as a knight than be pregnant. Hang on, what are you doing on Viserys' small council, Corlys? I mean, he was indeed on the small council, but it was when Jaehaerys was king, and he left his position as master of ships when Jaehaerys chose Balon to be his heir when his previous heir Aemon died. Thus he completely passed over his granddaughter, Aemon's daughter, Rhaenys, and her and Corlys' unborn potentially male child. So the founding of the triarchy of Myr, Lys and Tyros has been moved from 96 AC to 112 AC. I can only assume to make them more of an immediate plot point for later episodes. I like the new design for the Iron Throne, very reminiscent of Mark Simonetti's artwork of the throne, which George R.R. Martin says is the most accurate to what he pictures the Iron Throne actually looking like. A bit cheaty though to not have a lot of the swords actually connected to the throne, but still really cool looking. Anyone else feeling the flirtatious energy between this uncle and niece? This is even worse than Dany and Jon. A cut from the throne? Uh-oh, Viserys, that is not a good sign. You know, Emma, you really shouldn't fall asleep in the bath like that, no matter how relaxing it is. God, I miss having baths. I only have a shower where I live. You shouldn't joke about having a dragon baby, Emma. Do you not know of Maegor the First's children? One son with no eyes and small wings, not to mention a son with twisted limbs, a large head and no eyes, and then a child with no arms or legs and both male and female genitalia. Though, yes, they were the result of Maegor's third wife Tiana, a Pentoshi woman who dabbled in sorcery and alchemy, poisoning the children whilst in the wombs of Maegor's other wives. You shouldn't jinx it, Emma. Speaking of Maegor, Emma says Rhaenyra is convinced the baby is going to be a girl and wants her named Visenya, after Aegon the Conqueror's sister wife and also mother of Maegor I. With Viserys saying the family already has a Visenya rather than had, and Emma immediately bringing up Daemon, I can only assume they're comparing Visenya to Daemon, which makes sense if you then also compare Viserys to Rhaenys, not this Rhaenys but Aegon's other sister wife. As Viserys isn't much of a warrior, just as Rhaenys wasn't, Daemon in contrast is a warrior just as Visenya was, and he even possesses a Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister, which once belonged to Visenya. Viserys mentions the Grand Sept because the Great Sept of Baelor, you know, which Cersei blows up in Season 6 of Game of Thrones, won't begin construction until during the reign of Baelor Targaryen I, also known as Baelor the Blessed, in 161 AC and completed after his death in 171 AC. The joke Emma makes of giving birth to a baby that's literally wearing a crown makes me think of that scene from that old Super Mario TV show.
I was born with a plunger in my hand.
I know. Boy was awfully hard on Mom.
Commander on deck. And here we see the transformation of King's Landing's useless City Watch into Daemon Targaryen's dangerous gold cloaks, and Jesus Christ, are they dangerous. A trait which we know they still possess in the time of Game of Thrones, with them massacring Ned Stark's men and even putting to death all of Robert Baratheon's bastard children. I personally don't mind the man-ass, but yeah, I really didn't want to see that show. Ugh. The act of placing a smooth round stone into a receptacle of the small council table is a new creation for the show, and the stones appear to be some form of septarian, also known as Dragonstone. I think they should be called Dragon Balls myself. Daemon here refers to his wife Rhea Royce as his bronze bitch due to how House Royce wears runic bronze armour and the fact he doesn't really like her that much. He even asked Viserys when he became king to be allowed to set his marriage to Rhea aside, but Varys denied him this. Ah, so the Vale of Westeros is like Wales of the United Kingdom. I apologise, that was a poor joke. My bad. Daemon, did you pick up your Dragonstone? Don't forget your Dragonstone, Daemon. Dragonstone! And we get our first rather intimate look at Daemon's paramour, Mysaria. I'm going to say Mysaria. In Fire and Blood, she's described as having skin as pale as milk, and so she was named Misery, the white worm, by her enemies and rivals. I don't think the Mysaria in the show can be given that nickname, considering the colour of her skin. The reason Mysaria mentions bringing in several maidens to try and get Daemon back into the mood is because, according to Fire and Blood, Daemon has a particular fondness for deflowering maidens. I love this guy acting through getting whipped on the head by the very enthusiastic woman in front of him. This joust is a lot more fast-paced compared to what we see in the first season of Game of Thrones. The joust between Sir Hugh of the Vale and Gregor Clegane required more than one pass, and after Hugh dropped his lance, which I'm only just noticing now, explaining why he doesn't have a lance then suddenly does, as I pointed out in my Going Through Game of Thrones Season 1 Episode 4 video, they both just casually trot to the end, then wait a moment before charging again. Here though, there's no breather. You either grab that lance from the guy trying not to get trampled when you pass, or you are fucked. You might be confused as to why the Stag of the Baratheon Sigil has a crown, despite the fact this takes place before Robert's Rebellion, where he usurped the throne from the Targaryens. It's a mistake in terms of the lore established in Game of Thrones, but is actually in line with the lore established in the books. In Game of Thrones, the writers wanted it to be that the crown was added to the stag when Robert became king, just as Bran tells Maester Luwin in episode 5 of season 1 of Game of Thrones. In book lore, however, the stag has had its crown since the days when the sigil belonged to House Durrandon, who ruled as the Storm Kings of the Stormlands before Aegon Targaryen I conquered Westeros. Orys Baratheon, Aegon's one true friend and possibly bastard half-brother, adopted the crowned stag as his sigil, along with House Durrandon's honours and words, ours is the fury, when he slew the final Storm King, King Argilac Durrandon, also known as Argilac the Arrogant, and then married Argilac's daughter, Argella, thus creating House Baratheon of Storm's End. I love that we get to see the extravagant armour designs described in the books. Daemon's armor, especially his helmet, looks cool, and seeing Gwaine Hightower's tower helmet just makes you think he's a rook from a chessboard. Come on, referee, are you blind? How is that not a disqualification? Just because he almost got knocked off on the first pass, Daemon really didn't want to risk actually being beaten by the son of the guy he hates. What an absolute child. I love this woman's reaction to Gwaine scraping his face off on the ground. She looks so shocked. First, Alicent's concerned for her brother, who almost just died, but then she's flattered when his almost murderer asks for her favour. I agree with Otto's disapproving look. So we do get to see Corlys and Rhaenys' children, Laena and Laenor. Still don't know why he wasn't one of the final candidates to be Jaehaerys' heir along with Viserys. Just like Arya and Sansa watching Hugh die in Season 1 Episode 4 of Game of Thrones without freaking out, so too do Alicent and Rhaenyra watch the bloodbath happening in front of them without freaking out, or looking away, or throwing up like this poor guy here does, just vomiting everywhere. Viserys being given the decision to make to save either his wife or his child kind of reminds me of Captain Videl in Pan's Labyrinth telling the doctor to save the child over his wife because it is the child that will bear his name, just as Viserys wants this child to be his heir. Viserys just straight up takes away his wife's choice to either save herself or the baby, his wife who is still conscious and lucid I might add, and has her cut open and forced to sacrifice herself in the hopes of saving the baby, all because she told him this was the last time she was going to try for a baby, and so it's the last time for him to produce a legitimate heir. Maybe if she'd never said that to him, he would have chosen to save her over the baby, or, you know, given her a say in the matter, whether she wants to give up her life or not. You never know, she might have actually said, save the baby, but with how she reacted when she realised that what they were going to do, I very much doubt it. She very clearly did not want to die at all. I like Daemon desperately trying to pull himself back up onto his horse as he does a thingy on the rail.
It's called a grind, bro.
Oh, sorry, I mean as he does a grind thingy on the rail with his armour before he runs out of rail and crashes to the ground. This fight that occurs between Daemon and Criston according to Fire and Blood actually occurred during the melee of the tournament to celebrate Viserys' ascension to the throne in 104 AC. It's described that Criston used a Morning Star to disarm Daemon, whereas in the show he's very clearly using a flail. This, however, is apparently intentional, as Morning Star is what George R. R. Martin has people call flails in Westeros. The cuts between Criston and Daemon fighting and Emma dying during the cesarean were intentionally done to highlight Emma's earlier comment that the childbed is a woman's battlefield. In the show, this is Rhaenyra and Criston Cole's first meeting, yet by the time of Emma's death, Fire and Blood tells us he was already a member of Viserys' Kingsguard and had been named Rhaenyra's Sworn Shield at her request. Congratulations, Viserys, you sacrificed your wife and got a son in return. I guess your dream of seating him on the Iron Throne will come true after all. And though he names the baby Balon, it's never explicitly said whether he named him specifically after his father or not. Yep, that's Balon. Died one day after his mother. Poor little guy. At least you weren't born with wings or a tail. It was actually Matt Smith's idea to be the most caring and responsive out of him, Viserys and Rhaenyra, giving Rhaenyra a gentle push to light the pyre as Viserys is speechless in his grief, which Daemon notices and is pained by. I guess because Jacaerys means dragon fire in High Valyrian, it's always been the command to have your dragon breathe fire. There's no way I would stand in front of a dragon breathing fire in my direction like the Kingsguard do here. What a terrible place to have incredibly important and sometimes top secret discussions when someone can eavesdrop so easily as Daemon is doing here. Unless, of course, he has knowledge of the secret tunnels and passages of the Red Keep, and he's in one of them now. I like Daemon's reaction to his brother saying so confidently that he knows Daemon doesn't want to sit the throne badly enough to have him murdered. Yeah, maybe you should have a talk with Rhaenyra about when she found him actually sat on the throne, Viserys. And then his reaction to being called a second Maegor. Pretty bad to be compared to Maegor the Cruel, a man who murdered a lot of people, including the builders of the Red Keep when they had finished their work in order to keep the Keep's secret tunnels and passages a secret. Viserys, did you pick up your Dragonstone? Don't forget your Dragonstone, Viserys. Dragonstone? I wonder if the message Otto as Grand Maester Melor sent to Oldtown here will be important later on. Wow, dude, having your daughter dress up and throwing her at Viserys to try and get them in bed together? You nasty. Here we learn that Alicent's mother is actually dead, a point that's never mentioned in Fire and Blood due to the fact no mention is ever made of Alicent's mother, which could in and of itself point to her being dead. We never see Daemon calling Balon the heir for a day on purpose. Fire and Blood is written as an in-universe history book and as such is composed of information from many sources, some of which are possibly unreliable. Fire and Blood states Daemon was drunk and laughing with his buddies and that it was possibly the horse sitting in Daemon's lap at the time that informed Otto of what he said. But in the show, Daemon doesn't have a whore in his lap and is shown to be upset about the deaths of his sister-in-law and his nephew, and it seems more likely that he toasted to Balon as heir for a day in a depressed and bitterly sarcastic way rather than in a flippant and celebrating manner. Therefore, Otto could actually be twisting how Daemon said what he said in his favour to get Viserys mad at Daemon. I don't think that's entirely true there, Viserys, that Daemon has only you as an ally at court. Corlys has defended Daemon several times in this episode alone. I like when Daemon steps forward and the Kingsguard have started to draw their swords, we see Viserys has changed his grip on his own sword to hold it properly to use it if needed. Uh-oh, the throne has cut Viserys again. I think he's trying to tell you you made a big mistake there, Viserys. You are so fucked. And here we see the skull of Balerion the Dread, and if I'm not mistaken, it's black rather than bone colour. Just as in the books, dragon bones are described as being black due to its high iron content. Also, a fun fact, Viserys was the last person to ever ride Balerion before the dragon's death in 94 AC, a year after being claimed by Viserys. Is Viserys literally blaming the doom of Valyria on dragons? Because that'd be a theory I've never heard before. Most people in-universe believe the doom was caused by the natural eruption of the 14 volcanoes, the 14 flames. Other theories include some sectants believing the polytheistic Valyrians dug too deep into the Seven Hells, that it was the will of the Lord of Light R'hllor, or infighting dragon lords assassinating fire mages, causing their spells stopping the volcanoes from erupting to fail. Maybe that is what Viserys is referring to, comparing the dragons to the volcanoes, and how the Valyrians were deluded enough to believe they could control them, which evidently they could not. And here we see Daemon's dragon Caraxes, who used to belong to Daemon's father Aemon until his death, and Daemon claimed Caraxes for his own. Boromund Baratheon hesitates before swearing his loyalty to Viserys and Rhaenyra due to him being Rhaenys' uncle, Rhaenys' mother being Lady Jocelyn Baratheon, and as such House Baratheon would have rather had Jaehaerys name Rhaenys his heir rather than Viserys. Boromund then here will probably now prefer Viserys to name Rhaenys' son Laenor his heir, if not Rhaenys herself, rather than Rhaenyra or Daemon. Viserys mentions two prophecies here, one we've heard before and one that's totally new. He mentions the dream of Denys Targaryen, now known as Denys the Dreamer, who foresaw the doom of Valyria 12 years before it happened, and is the reason her father, Aenar Targaryen, moved his entire family and everything he owned to Dragonstone. The second entirely new prophecy is that Aegon Targaryen didn't want to conquer Westeros just for ambition's sake, but because he had a dream about the end of the world, that the White Walkers would emerge from the north, and only a united Westeros could stand against them with a Targaryen king to lead them. White Walkers versus Targaryens, ice versus fire, the Song of Ice and Fire. Also, Aegon interpreted his dream, though from what we saw in Game of Thrones it seems more likely it wasn't ice versus fire, but the joining of ice and fire with a Targaryen fire and a Stark ice, giving birth to a child who will lead the living against the dead, aka Aegon Jon Snow Targaryen. This conquering people to unite them to fight against an encroaching threat reminds me of one of Palpatine's reasons to conquer and unify the galaxy into the First Galactic Empire, being that they can then face the encroaching threat of the Yuuzhan Vong as one. The approaching invasion of the Yuuzhan Vong was also one of the main reasons that Grand Admiral Thrawn wanted to reunify what was left of the Empire in 9 ABY, since he felt the New Republic wouldn't have been up to the task. So is this meant to be the famous Valyrian steel dagger that would eventually be wielded by Arya Stark to kill the Night King and bring an end to the White Walkers? Viserys says that this prophecy has been passed down from king to heir since Aegon. So Aegon told his son and heir Aenys, and Aenys told his son and heir Aegon, now known as Aegon the Uncrowned, but then when Aenys died, his half-brother Maegor the Cruel usurped the throne and killed Aegon the Uncrowned. Maegor, having usurped the throne, then couldn't have known about the prophecy, and upon his death and Jaehaerys becoming king, it's unknown how he then found out about the prophecy, though possibly Aegon the Uncrowned told his wife of the prophecy, and she in turn told Jaehaerys when he took the throne. Just like Game of Thrones, the music for this show is on point, and it's great to hear the Game of Thrones theme over the credits. Makes me wonder though if it's still going to be used for the intro sequence that's going to be introduced in the next episode, or if a different piece of music is going to be used. I wonder as well if the very important character of Mushroom, the dwarf court jester, will be introduced in later episodes, as many of the accounts in Fire and Blood came from him, though often filled with many outrageous embellishments. So those were all my thoughts on the first episode of the first season of House of the Dragon, The Heirs of the Dragon. If you think I missed anything important or interesting, put it in a comment below along with your own thoughts on the episode. My most liked part of the episode goes to the jousting scenes, how fast-paced, frenetic and brutal they were, and how Daemon and Kristen's joust and subsequent fight are used to juxtapose Emma going through the bloody dangerous business of at first natural birth and then birth by C-section. And my most disliked part of the episode goes to, I guess, the CGI when Rhaenyra and Syrax lands was a little bit janky, but other than that, I don't really have any complaints about the episode. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any advice on what I could do better for the next video, please leave it in a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that bell, and follow me on Twitter at @SSS_YouTube. I'm also on Odyssey at @SSS:83, so follow me on there if that's where you prefer to watch videos. Thank you again for watching, and I shall see you all again next time. Goodbye.